Hey everyone, welcome to the video. Today I want to talk about perception, memory, and how both of those faculties relate to personality psychology. My starting point is going to be the assertion that there is a near infinite amount of information in the world. In order for us to act in the world, we have to interpret and make sense of some parts of that information, some subsets of the vast array of information that make up our physical and social environment. You can define perception as the interpretation of parts of information from the world. Now, to act more efficiently as we are navigating our environment, we want to be able to take those patterns of perception from the past that have enabled us to accomplish our goals and utilize them in the present, and also make anticipations about what's going to happen in the future. The utilization of past perceptions to make more intelligent, goal-oriented decisions in the present and to make predictions about the future, we can use that as a definition of memory. So let's talk about perception a little more in depth. There's three important characteristics that I want to highlight about perception that I think many people get wrong. First, perception is a complementary function with action. Second, perception is goal-oriented. And third, perception is embodied. So for the first characteristic, there is no perception without action. I think that's a safe claim to make. What's the saying? To see is to look, to hear is to listen. I forget the rest of it, but the point is that even with something, even if we take one of the perceptual channels, let's say your visual function, your eyes are constantly moving. And if you actually stop your eye from moving, there's a high chance that you'll go blind. You have these microsaccades, so your eyes are always twitching in a small way. Then you have saccades that are movements of eyes that are over a longer time period compared to microsaccades. And then you have involuntary eye movements where if something happens to the right, if a loud noise or if a car kind of, drives past you very quickly, you'll orient and your eyes will involuntarily track that moving object. And then of course you can voluntarily move your eyes. But then on top of that, and this ties into the embodied characteristic of perception, it's not just that you're moving your eyes, which determines what you see and how you perceive the world. You're also moving your neck, you're moving your head, you're angling your head and your neck in a certain way, and then you're moving your entire body to interact with your environment. And what you perceive and the meaning that you derive from the information around you plays a major role in determining what your next action is going to be. But at the same time, your action, how you're moving your body, determines what information is available to you to be perceived. And so you get this perception action loop that is a necessary component of optimal perception and of sense making in the world. And I think that definitely prior to, let's say, maybe the 1990s, perception was believed to be a passive function where there's information out in the world and it just gets imposed on us somehow. But it's important to understand that perception is an active process. It's an active process that is tightly associated with action. I already brought up a part of how perception is embodied. When we're trying to filter out information in the world so that way we can hone in on what we need to pay attention to, much of that is filtered out by our body. So again, talking about visual perception, our eyes are shaped in a certain way. Your body is at a certain height, so you see at a certain distance from the ground. There are many other physiological factors that play into not only how you see the world and how you perceive, but again, also how you act and move in the world. And so perception is also embodied. It's not something that just happens in your head. And so it's important when discussing perception to note that it's not just in your mind, it's not just in your brain, it's something that's embodied and is tightly associated with your entire nervous system. And the final characterization of perception that I want to talk about is that it's goal oriented. If we maintain our definition of perception as the interpretation of information so that way we can act in the world, we aren't just acting randomly in the world, we are facilitating motivated actions. And for something to be motivated, that implies that there's a goal. Your goal is something that you desire, it's something that you want. And it shapes your perceptions by helping you, along with many other systems, understand what's important, what is positive in the sense that you want to approach it, and what's negative in the sense that you want to run away from it. Again, we are embodied creatures that are trying to make our way through an environment. And as we're perceiving the world, one of the ways you can think about how we perceive the world is that we perceive the world as a place of things that we need to approach and things that we need to avoid. But approach and avoidance, which are also, generally speaking, the two major emotional systems, positive emotion and negative emotion, they're predicated on your goal and what you're aiming at and what you're trying to seek. So if you change your goal, you change how you perceive the world to a very large degree. And just honing in on this goal-oriented nature of perception, it could also be the case that we have conscious and unconscious goals. And it's definitely the case that people vary in the goals that they maintain as priority in their lives and how they see the world. So on that first point, you might consciously want to go out to a party, but you might unconsciously not want to go out to the party. And so as you're perceiving the world or trying to perceive the world, there's a part of you psychologically that has conflict. And goal conflict is essentially anxiety. You're uncertain. You don't know how to see the world. You don't know how to interpret things because many stimuli, many patterns of the world, such as getting a text message, hey, are you ready for the party? Or maybe even your friends pulling up to pick you up. You're trying to ask yourself how to perceive it. Is that good or bad? Well, according to one goal, it's good, but according to another goal, it's bad. And that puts you in a state of anxiety and uncertainty and heightened levels of attention because you don't know how to interpret the world. So goal conflict, in part, can lead to anxiety because you're having trouble perceiving and interpreting the world because you don't have a solid goal. Goal conflict can also lead to issues between people and in relationships if two people don't have the same goal. And for me, this has been very important to understand because it's not just that people with different goals are having conflicts or miscommunications or misunderstandings at some surface level. Depending on how powerful that goal is, it is literally shaping how each person views the world. And so if these two individuals that are in conflict have widely differing goals, then their experience of the world is also vastly different. And in trying to ameliorate that conflict, it definitely can't be easy. But I think that one step in understanding how to get through and navigate those conflicts is to know that if someone has a deeply valued goal that is different from your deeply valued goal, you to a very large degree inhabit different worlds. And just making yourself aware of that can be helpful so that way you take each other with the respect and seriousness that you probably adopt on yourself. Many people who think that perception is just passive and that we don't construct our experience, they think that the world is filled with objects and people and facts that are just there, self-evidently so, in an a priori manner, where you just walk up to something and you see it. You just walk up to your car and there it is, and you get in it and you drive to work. But from this understanding of perception that I'm trying to convey, the fact that it's goal oriented, the fact that it's embodied, the fact that it's tied to action, you each play an active role as agents in constructing your perceptions and your experience of those perceptions. So just as something is quite self-evident to you in how you see the world and in your worldview, for someone else who has a different worldview, it's the same level of intensity and realness for them. So just acknowledging that up front can make things a little bit easier as you're trying to have discussions with other people. And it could also bring a sense of humility where, well, there might be something that you're missing in your worldview, which is why you don't see it the way the other person sees it. So again, when it comes to trying to understand yourself and trying to understand other people, I think this theory of perception is helpful in at least making us humble and understanding that the world is not preset out there for you to a very large degree. We play a major role in shaping how we see the world, and biological, psychological, and social differences will lead us to see the world differently. And so if we want to get along and if we want to build productive relationships, we have to first have that understanding that you could be wrong in why you're viewing the situation this way, and the other person could be wrong. So maybe we should all just start from a place of humility and try to discuss what our goals are, why we value those goals, and then from there try to see if we can get on the same page in terms of the paradigm we're using to view the world. So that's perception. Now, when it comes to memory, you can think of memory as a pattern of perception. Yeah, I think that's good. You can think of memory as a pattern of perception. The purpose of memory, just like with perception, is to help you accomplish your goals. It's to help you figure out which actions you need to take in this current moment or perhaps in the future, so that way you can accomplish your goals. Memory, generally speaking, has two steps in its process. There's encoding and then there's retrieval. Encoding starts with perception, but it can differ in terms of the selection of information that gets encoded, which is just, to encode something just means that there are parts of the system that modify itself to represent the thing that's being encoded. And so encoding can differ in terms of the selection of things that are getting encoded and the intensity at which the thing gets encoded. So not everything that's perceived gets encoded into memory. And of the things that get encoded into memory, some things are more elaborately encoded than others, so they stick with you longer than others. So that's encoding. And then you have retrieval, and retrieval is remembering. It's the reactivation of those neural patterns that represent the experience, the memory, so that that knowledge or that schema can be either unconsciously or consciously available to utilize, so that way you can more efficiently conduct your action pattern that's going to help you in your current situation given your goals. So memory and perception are tightly linked, and all of those characterizations that we discussed with perception can also be utilized for memory. Memory is an active process that involves constructing memories and reconsolidating memories. So every time you remember something, a large proportion of neuronal patterns that make up the representation, make up the memory, are active, but there are also other neuronal patterns that are firing. And so every time you remember something at the level of the brain, some things are different. And so it's not like when you remember something, when you encode it, it's like a file that you store away. And then when you remember it, you can bring it up exactly the same way that you encoded it. It's changing a little bit over time. And there are many experiments showing that we can bring up negative memories, for example, in a positive context, And then when you reconsolidate that memory, so you remember it and then not that it goes away, you reconsolidate it, you file it away, so to speak, even though I just said that that wasn't the correct metaphor, but I'm just going to use that metaphor for now. When you file it away and then you retrieve it and remember it the next day or sometime in the future, the level of negativity decreased. So your current context plays a role in not only which memories get remembered or retrieved, but also how they get retrieved and how they get reconstructed in the present. Again, memories are also goal oriented, and they're important for helping you to act in the current moment. So, perception, memory, talked about those. How can we relate them to personality psychology and individual differences? I kind of already alluded to that, particularly with perception, but the same also applies for how people encode memory and what memories get retrieved in the present moment, which also impacts how we perceive things. People vary in severity and intensity in terms of all of those things. People have different goals, they value goals differently, they have certain capabilities and limitations when it comes to certain actions. And so, given that people have different action patterns available to them, they will see the world as affording or not affording those different action patterns. One of the paradigms that I'm fond of for personality is called the Big Five paradigm. The acronym is OCEAN, so openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And those are 5 personality dimensions along which personality researchers have mapped personality. And you can think about those different dimensions in terms of how people remember and perceive the world differently. So, for example, someone who's more neurotic, they experience more negative emotion per stimulus compared to the average person. So they're more risk averse, and you could also say that their goal, to the degree that they're more neurotic, is security and safety. That's what they like. They want to avoid threat, again, to the degree that they are neurotic. This would mean that this person, given the goal of security and safety, they will perceive the world as a place of potential dangers and threats and things to avoid. And that's different from someone who is either less neurotic, and so they'll view the world less as a threat, or someone who is higher in a completely different personality dimension. Let's say someone who's more agreeable. Someone who's agreeable will view the world as a place of people who need to be cared for, or a place of that is filled with people who should all be in harmony and happy, and they want to avoid conflict, interpersonal conflict. So one of the ways that you can understand personality differences, simply put, is as a set of different goals. People have different goals, and therefore they have different perceptions, and therefore they remember different things and encode different phenomena in the world differently, which can lead to just completely different experiences. And as we're trying to navigate relationships, as you're trying to understand yourself and understand other people, again, it's helpful to know that things aren't just set in the world for you in a self-evident manner. You and your personality and the personality of other people play a major role in shaping experience. And that's not to say that everyone sees the world completely differently. That's not true, or else we wouldn't be able to talk and you wouldn't be able to understand what I'm saying. There are some levels of differences that can lead to misunderstandings and conflicts, and sometimes it's very deep. And I think that's one of the paradigms that we can overlay on current cultural and political events and things that are happening, and discourses that are going on. For many people, this is one assertion that I'll leave you all with to end this video. It's not necessarily the case that when someone who has a different personality type than you and therefore perceives and remembers the world differently than you, it's not necessarily the case that they are wrong. It's just that they're different. That's not to say that all interpretations of the world are relative and they're equal. It is to say that we first have to acknowledge that there's a near infinite amount of information in the world, and therefore when we're trying to interpret it so that way we can act, there are going to be multiple interpretations, and some of them are going to be better than others. But sometimes there might just be multiple correct ways of looking at the same thing. And I think that that's helpful to keep in mind when we're having certain discussions with people that we may disagree with, or when we're having discussions with our intimate partner. If they see the world differently than you, it could be that you're wrong, but it could also be that they're wrong. But it's not necessarily self evident. And given that we inherently just cannot analyze all of the information in the world at the same time, there's always that possibility that there's something that you missed. And that's, at least for me, a reason why it's important to be able to listen deeply to other people and to understand where they're coming from, because there might have been something that you missed, and there might be something that they're saying that can help you learn and help you better understand yourself and better understand the world. So, gonna end it there. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you in the next video.